direction of the planet to a sustainable one. This first series, this is energy, fire. The 5 elements, we're going to be doing a 5-part series over the next 5 months. The first one is energy, fire. Then we have earth, sacred geometry, water, air, and ether over the next 5 months. On today's Synergy webinar, we have Dave Parker from the Free Energy Party. We have Dan Winter. We have David Sarita talking about crystal and vortex energy. And we also have Sterling Allen from New Energy Systems. This is a 5-part series, like I said. You can go to synergyoneness.com for more information. And at the end of each webinar, we're going to give you over 2,000 pages of free energy, schematics, generators, earth batteries, so much information. We want you to get this out to your family and friends. So at the end of each webinar, make sure to check your email because we'll be sending that to you shortly. Also including in these webinars, we're going to have inclusiveness with each participant sending us their latest studies, the latest projects they're working on, and things like that. Today's Synergy webinar is going to start with Dan Winter. Dan Winter's new book presents the most compelling and systematic scientific evidence to date that fractality in space and time is the specific mechanism and cause of gravity, biologic, I know I'm going to say this word right, nijotropathy, life force, perception, and human bliss. Dan has been called Doctor of the Universe of Detroit, shout out to Detroit, which I love, as having formerly collaborated with IBM and the MIT Space Laboratories, as well as working together with Buckminster Fuller and other famous scientists. You can check out his website and many others at fractalfield.com. Dan is joining us all the way from the other side of the pond in France, so thank you so much, Dan, for joining us. How are you?
Your line is now unmuted.
Nice to be with you. Happy to be here. Hi to all.
Excellent. Good, good. So what I wanted to do, Dan, is just talk about a couple of questions first, a series of 6 questions. And if you would just give us a 3-5 minute answer, then after that, I want to jump into what your groundbreaking background is in right now and the exciting stuff that you're doing. But let's just start off with a couple questions and answer them as simply as possible because we really want to get this information out to the teenagers, to the young people, because now's the time to collaborate and get the knowledge and information out. So we want to break it down as easily as possible. The first question is, what is the fundamental concept of free energy and why is it so important that we focus on these type of technologies to provide us with free energy?
Well, we have always said that the term free energy was perhaps a little bit inappropriate. In physics, we call it vacuum coherence. Calling it free energy means it comes from nowhere or there's no price to be paid, which is probably not quite accurate. The fact is that the background resonance of the universe has tremendous inertia, tremendous charge, tremendous energy. All of the scientists agree that the amount of energy in the vacuum is huge. Nassim and I and many have been teaching about the immense energy of the vacuum. And cohering the vacuum is a term that applies to taking that energy from the vacuum and making use of it. For example, a pine cone, you can measure about 5 to 20 millivolts, and that's a form of capacitance that's extracting charge or energy from the vacuum. But a reason why perhaps calling it free is not appropriate, even in the Atlantean stories, you have this idea of this fire crystal, the toy stone, the implosive capacitive crystals of Atlantis. And you can cohere the vacuum massively and extract large amounts of energy, but a price to be paid is, in fact, there's a deflection of the gravity field in the coherence, and you could even disturb your tectonics. So calling it free energy means a sort of lack of responsibility, so I prefer to call it vacuum coherence. But we totally agree that understanding the nature of vacuum coherence is essential to our civilization because the same physics which allows a pine cone to extract energy from the vacuum or a capacitor to do it, for example, Tesla's charged shuttle oscillator, is the form of energy that allows us to design a building, a city, or even your clothing in such a way that your environments helps you extract energy as life force from the vacuum, which obviously is what a fractal field is, and that's what today's conversation is about. Oh, we lost your sound.
Okay, second question here. How are these technologies safer on the environment and to ourselves?
Again, well, that's a wonderful question. The fact is that the nature of life force is the ability to be fractal or negentropic or centripetal, like onions and ferns and pine cones, where the inside looks like the outside, and that's what creates environments which are self-charging, self-organizing, emerge from chaos, what I call neg-entropy. So in effect, in order to design sustainability in environments, which is to say self-organization, that which is emerges from chaos, we must know how to extract that vacuum coherence. So it's essential. For example, very practically, we suggest that the very term sustainability is absolutely and only defined by harmonic systems that are self-organizing, negentropic. For example, I have shown that the frequencies that are contained in the Schumann resonance of the planet, that harmonic series, 3, about 8, 12, etc., that harmonic series of the Schumann resonance almost exactly corresponds to what's called a negentropic phase conjugate pump wave, basically implosive collapse. So the reason that Gaia is self-organizing is because her fractal field is maintained by this implosive caduceus cascade. So in order to have stability, sustainability in environments, we must absolutely understand vacuum coherence.
Now let me ask you number 3, because that sort of dovetails into that. In your opinion, which of these type of free energy technologies or devices currently are available do you see being the most effective solutions for consumers, and what do you suggest is the best way of implementing this type of technology into societies today?
We have been deeply involved in a variety of these technologies. You know, I knew Tom Bearden very well, and he designed what he called the MEG, which was basically reciprocating tank circuits, oscillating coils, and the geometry of reciprocation is implosive, which is, say, conjugate or fractal. Visualize pine cones kissing noses in a waveform, and you kind of got the picture. And that is the principle behind also Tesla's Charged Shuttle Oscillator, and also it's the principle behind the Bedini battery charger, all of which are circuits that extract energy from the vacuum. And I say that once the principle is understood behind all of them, that it's very easy to go to the next step and make use of them. But we, as a culture, cannot take responsibility for those kinds of energies until we actually know how to use it. The one we are bringing to market first, and you can see the pictures, and I will show them in a moment, theraphi.net, therapy by phi, theraphi.net. And in that one, we're using the same implosive plasma, and we create a negentropic, self-organizing healing field. And so we do biologic rejuvenation first, because it's the same principle. It's that Shem, altar unto the Lord. Implosive capacitance is life force. And so we're going to bring the life force ones to market first. And then the energy technologies, and there's a whole host of them, they all operate in the same principle, can follow quickly, but our civilization can't take responsibility for using them until we understand the principle. So the issue is education.
Absolutely. I've seen that across the board right now, where many people like yourself are focusing on education. If there's no demand and there's no one wanting or even aware of these type of free energy and type of new energy systems, then what are we all spinning our wheels for? Next question is, do you believe free energy and this type of energy can help bring an end to poverty? And if so, how would it contribute to this change? What do you think?
No, I think that's absolutely the right question, that the poverty and starvation on this planet is entirely unnecessary if we understood what is in effect efficient charge circulation, which you could say is fractal economics. And we have a new project on fractal economics coming out very soon. It goes like this, basically, that in an energy system, if you find a way to distribute wave inertia efficiently, that distribution can go infinite, which is what a pine cone basically does, and achieve perfect distribution with zero resistance. It's literally the definition of phyllotaxis, you know, maximum exposure, minimum superposition. Now, if you apply that to economics, you have what's called literally perfect sharing, which is to say a perfectly shareable wave. So we believe that fractal economics, charge distribution efficiency, not only does it define how life works in people, why every living thing has pentagonal symmetry in its protein geometry, but if you apply that to urban design and then how life force is distributed between farms, for example, you create abundance by the very physics of efficient distribution of charge. Because money is only a symbol for human energy well distributed. And if we don't understand fractal distribution, we're obviously not distributing resource. So there's a whole reinvention of the concept of abundance here based on perfect sharing. And this is very Christian.
And I also know that many of those concepts and stuff also enhance the growth of vegetables. They enhance and add minerals. It's amazing stuff. The next question, what do you believe is the best technology that you've seen so far that's currently available on the market for consumers now that can help improve in that area and really be able to get into people's hands? What's something on the market that you would recommend to listeners out there?
You mean energy technology or growth technology?
Energy technology, growth technology, based upon just like what you said, where there's a technology that can enhance the growth of seeds and add 40% to the growth process and how fast things can grow. What would be some technologies out there right now that we can go use and test and see for our own eyes?
Well, for growth technology, we have been very successful. TheImploder.com for agriculture uses implosive Schauberger's Dream vortex with implosive magnetics, and we achieve extreme solubility hydration, and we typically have 20-40% growth increase in plants. We've had replicated 60% growth improvement in hemp, etc. And parallel to that, now we're launching, that's a water technology for agriculture and very healthy for people and hydration. But parallel to that, we're also now launching seed pulse treatment technologies. You know, when Burke, in his book Seeds of Knowledge, documented that the reason structures like Stonehenge really existed, primary, was if you take seeds there and you pulse them with the electric field generated by sacred stone circles, they got 20-40% seed growth increase. And later then, Burke and Levengood, with Nancy's help, Nancy Talbot, they achieved typically 25-50% increase in growth in seeds by high voltage pulse seed treatment. Now we know what that was. You know, I just planted a few seeds out here in France the other day, and I did 2 sets. One right after a lightning storm, and the ones right after the lightning storm, boom, immediate growth. The ones without the lightning storm, no, almost none. Now what that is a square wave pulse seed treatment that creates an implosive impulse. And basically the difference between life or death for a seed is if it can be sucking in its first nutrient, which is a negentropic, a suction electrically, a negentropy, electronegativity. So the ability to suck in the first food is life or death for a seed, and that's an implosive field, and that's triggered by the charge of what was the Shemin to the Lord, the Stonehenge, the stone circle. And now we know how to do that optimally because we have the exact frequency signatures. And that is what Therify.net is, this beautiful pre-or plasma treatment. So we think we have the bee's knees for seed treatments as well. So many of these things are coming out now, and we're in the middle of it.
Excellent.
And people can learn more at bloomthedesert.com. Bloomthedesert.com as well.
It really is. That's what's so exciting, and that's why I think these webinars are so important when you have so many great minds like yourself talking about the technology. It's out there, telling people where to get it. It's the lack of information that most people don't even know this stuff exists. So it's very, very important work you're doing, Dan. Thank you.
It's all about a fractal field.
Yeah. Now, I have one last question that I'm going to ask at the end of your interview here. So what I'd like to do now is open it up to an open format. You can upload your PD files, and let's get started with where your focus has been, what you're up to, Fractal. You had a very exciting last 2 years. We talked about it on the radio show this week on Starseed Radio, and it was an amazing interview. Had lots of good response. So we'll dive into that. I know you have some graphs and pictures. I'm a visual learner myself, So it's good to see some visual pictures. And we can walk it. Are you familiar how to do that, Dan?
Yeah, so I'm going to put a shared desktop up here and share some graphics at this moment. So what I want to talk about here is the core principle behind life force and negentropic fields. So basically,
Excellent.
what we start with on the real definition of why fractality in space and time is the origin of negentropy, self-organization, the cause of life force, gravity, and all centripetal forces, including the cause of the origin of color and the cause of the origin of photosynthesis. Starts with a very simple concept. I don't know if you can see this little red circle in the center. This is, and it's like there's a sine wave in the middle, and that sine wave in the middle of that red circle, the symbol of the Tao, quite literally, is the length and time of Planck. Planck length and time, which in physics is the universal wavelength that divides evenly into every wave physics has ever measured. So physics clearly has a key signature, and that is it. There's no disagreement. Now, what I discovered is if you take that sphere, that Planck length and time, and use exact whole number exponents, multiples of golden mean ratio called phase conjugation, you get this caduceus here, and that predicts a series of lengths, which are, in my new equation, which I discovered, are the radii of hydrogen. Specifically, here's a picture of 3 radii of hydrogen. This is the top-down view of hydrogen, these red 10 golden spirals. And these radii of hydrogen are exact exponents, golden ratio to the 116, 117, 118, whole number exponents, golden ratio times Planck, gives you the exact hydrogen radii. This was my first major discovery. So what I'm proving there is that what's holding hydrogen together is the phase conjugation of golden mean ratio. That's what's making it centripetal. That's how gravity is made in hydrogen. Now, if you extend that principle, we get things like the, here, these are the exact 2 frequencies of photosynthesis. There's only 2 frequencies, the purple and the orange here, literally purple and orange color. This is the graph of the amount of photosynthesis that happens versus the frequency of color. And notice green here prevents photosynthesis, so clearly that's not what does it. No, what does photosynthesis is the 427 nanometers of purple and the 691 nanometers of orange. Now if you take that, my equation, again, Planck length times exponents of golden mean ratio, golden mean to the 136 and 137 power, you get the exact wavelengths of photosynthesis. So this tells you that photosynthesis is also what's called a phase conjugate implosive negentropic collapse. In other words, it's tuned to Planck. Now you can do that for many things, including, for example, here, these are the exact frequencies, the real frequencies of the Schumann harmonics of the planet. Greg Braden was a little confused saying they're changing. They're not. The frequencies of Schumann are 3 Hertz, 7.83, 14.3, and 20.8. Very close to the exact equation, Planck time times exponents of golden ratio here, 2.78, 4.5, 7.29, 11.8. These are the exact frequencies of phase conjugate collapse. In other words, the planet is remaining negentropic, which is to say Gaia, because its frequencies are a caduceus here, phase conjugate collapse. Now if you take that principle and you apply that to perception here, so the first 3 pictures I was referring to are at fractalfield.com/conjugate gravity. Now I'm going to look at the phase conjugate model of perception, fractalfield.com/conjugate perception. And here, on the left, this is my work on brain waves, my Bliss tuner, showing that peak perception in brain waves, the actual moment of bliss, exists at this moment when the alpha to beta harmonic series is in golden ratio in the brain waves. And look at this chart. These brain waves of this moment of bliss are the exact frequencies of the phase conjugate collapse of the Schumann. So the Schumann frequencies and the phase conjugate collapse frequencies and the brainwave frequencies are all the exact same harmonic cascade, and that is what creates peak perception. Because what's happening inside your head, now we talked about this in the radio show, this is a graphic of how you might visualize that. This is the right hemisphere and left hemisphere of your brain making this golden ratio harmonic cascade of frequencies. But now we know the right and left hemisphere have to be 180 degrees out of phase. Two pine cones kissing noses. Here's the picture. It looks like the Holy Grail. And what's generated at the center, phase conjugation creates what's called a longitudinal wave, sometimes incorrectly called scalar, and that's a compressional wave, and that will go through about anything. It's faster than the speed of light, longitudinal EMF, and it can reconverge at a distance and create heat at a distance. Plasma containment, this is called the flame in the mind physics. It's the origin of psychokinesis. The brain is basically making this longitudinal scalar, and you're able to focus light at a distance. This is how Luke Skywalker's swords worked. This is how the Nazi Foo Fighters worked. This is the ultimate in plasma containment. This is, for example, how the Holy Fire in Jerusalem is constructed from archaeoacoustics. This is the flame in the mind physics.
Now, Dan, this is also found all throughout nature, correct? It's found in the frequency. I mean, it all boils down to this one frequency.
That's right. That's right. My entire book, Origin of Biologic Negentropy, at fractalfield.com, is about only one simple frequency cascade, Planck times power of golden ratio. That's the only subject of the book because it's the only way you need to account for every origin of living self-organization. Just to finish the thought here, that on the left you have the two frequencies of the heart rate variability, the LF and the HF, one of which is the 0.1 hertz Meyer wave. Again, perfect phase conjugate powers exponents of the Planck time times golden ratio. And on the right here, you have the frequencies of the spine liquid pump, which are a subset of the HRV, the sacrocranial frequencies, which we know if your spine liquid's pumping, it's clinically impossible to be depressed. It's the physics of bliss and kundalini, and it is the same harmonic cascade caduceus. And on the far left here, you have, here are the frequencies of, oops, I lost the screen. What I wanted to refer to, those are the frequencies of this, of the adenosine diphosphate triphosphate, which is basically ADP, ATP, which is the high frequency ultraviolet coherence, which is a motor Volz cell metabolism, ATP. So again, it's phase conjugate implosive collapse. So this is now, I'm going to the website about our cancer therapy. It was basically Priory here in France invented a light bulb that healed thousands of cases of cancer, as documented by the French government. And I discovered the principle, which is basically...
Is that the actual machine that you're showing a picture of? That's the actual device itself?
Here's the actual device. So basically what we have here is a pair of plasma tubes. The plasma tubes look like this when they're mounted. This is two plasma tubes. And the plasma tubes contain a noble gas. Now a noble gas is a phase conjugator. And maybe just to relate that idea, here is the picture from the cold plasma research we did with the Keshe group, fractalfield.com/cold plasma. And the noble gases, like the monoatomic elements, create this geometry here called Buckminster fullerene, which is basically this. Yes. So the fullerenes and the monoatomics and the noble gases all have one thing in common, and that is the outer valence atomic, electron, and molecular geometry is dodecaecosa interdigitation, which is to say, you know, a fullerene, the perfect geodesic. And so the top-down view is this dodeca nest. And so you take that Bucky fullerene, and I was with Bucky when we first did this work with the jitterbug and collapse. And if you look at the way that creates a structure, that if you take that dodecahedron and you ratchet it down a helix, if you do that at a molecular level, you have DNA. But if you do it at the atomic level, you have a carbon nanotube, which is a phase conjugator. And so the whole idea of these magical cold plasmas and these magical monoatomics is all based on one simple principle, and that is phase conjugation. So, going back to the conversation we were having about plasma healing, in these two plasma tubes we have a noble gas. Noble gas recipe might be proprietary here, but we have a noble gas recipe, which is called a phase conjugator optically, which is, say, high frequency phase conjugation. And then, if you modulate carefully, and the elegant way we do this is a bit proprietary electronically, but if you modulate on there the low frequencies from the cover of my book, which is the same cascade we got for brain waves and Schumann harmonics and all of the magic stuff that creates negative. You modulate the high frequency phase conjugation with a low frequency and do it accurately 180 degrees out of phase between opposing conjugators, you have a magic healing zone in the center. And you know, we're at a preliminary phase, but even in the early trials, every single thing we've worked on biologically, from a cyst, which went away in one treatment basically, and a melanoma and swelling and all of these other diseases, basically this is a light bulb that it's a tumor shrinker. And it was very successful for Priory, but he used multi-million-dollar electronics at that time, and we've got this down now to a portable system, actually, and we're installing in 3 countries this month, actually. So this, not only is this, you know, it's kind of the ultimate healing system because it's highly centripetal. And by the way, it accelerates metabolism, it's a Kundalini trigger, it's a stem cell switch, it's a shamanic wormhole. You create a tunnel of vision the same way you do in your head. It is the flame in the mind maker. It's basically how the holy fire in Jerusalem works. And it is spiritual in the sense that you're creating a zone of life force. And so obviously your blood needs time to cleanse after you do this. So there's some very practical issues. And we're launching in medical clinics with competent medical people. But the fact is that, so this was technology we developed in Canada, Brazil, supported from Australia, and we're installing in the US and France and Belgium. And so this is a very global project. But the point is that the principle here is beautiful, the same implosive field, the same fractal field, the same living field. So we want to start this with the living field demonstration and then proceed to the energy technologies.
Now, this particular, how much is a unit like this per se out in the market? Can people buy one now for a sick and loved family member, or do they have to go to a special spa or center or contact you? How does one go about using one or finding one?
The Therify.net installations in 3 countries, the context there will be on the website. Right now it's France, Belgium, and the US. Soon it will be Canada, Australia, and Brazil. Right now at the demonstration sites, the costs are minor. The actual cost of the hardware, $10,000 to $20,000 now. But it's not being commercially available. So far we've made it commercially available to clinical medical people who are very competent in their field, many of whom actually had experience and knowledge about when Priory was doing this in France years ago and had such great success. But in fact, the reason they couldn't propagate it at the time because no one knew the physics of how it worked. And now we do.
Excellent information. I just wanted to also, go into a little bit about the overall picture, Dan, of what we're all trying to do. Meaning that the synergy oneness of the elements is fire, energy. We have the earth element, which is sacred geometry. Laura Eisenhower, Philip Gruber from the Sacred Geometry Academy, Charles Gilchrist. We have water, Alan Steinfeld, air, talking about vibrations. We have ether, Adam Apollo, quantum vacuum. We have all these different elements, all these different categories, areas of vast information that in a whole lifetime someone couldn't understand, as you know. When you see all these different areas of expertise and things like that, where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the synergy of bringing all that together so we can all work together to get this out into society? Otherwise, I just see people doing their own projects and spinning their wheels. How do we bring the elements together cohesively?
Well, I have always said that self-empowerment requires an understanding of pure principle. And what we mean by that is that the planet has suffered from religion wars, obviously. And religion wars, in my view, are caused by disempowering understanding, miracle worship, and personality worship. And to get past that, we need to make the connection between spiritual ideas and pure self-empowering physics. And so in my view, the critical step for our planet is to take spiritual ideas and use physics to make them self-empowering. Now, a lot of people assume that if you're going to talk about spirituality using physics, you will make spirituality less beautiful or less romantic or less intelligent or less divine. But I say, and I emphasize, that the opposite is the case. That, in fact, if we understand spiritual ideas with physics, the spirituality becomes deeper and more profound if you knew how your plasma goes directly through the heart of the sun when you die successfully. Pure physics of plasma projection. It makes all the ideas of sun god immediately more beautiful, and it gives you direct self-empowering access to what used to be called the miraculous. Now, I'd like to give one specific example of that, if I may.
Yes, please, absolutely.
Our friend from Greece, Dr. Stavros, just shared with us his favorite book's called The Holy Fire. And it's all about this chapel under Jerusalem, and there's a cave in Greece also, where every year this plasma fire shows up in response to prayer and in a very sacred space. And this plasma fire is a cold fire. It's well documented. It does not consume. It's a fire that does not burn. And it lights thousands of candles instantly. It's well documented. But now I'm about to describe the physics of why it exists. But now when I describe the physics of why this holy fire exists, that does not mean it's not self-aware. I'm not saying it's not divine. I'm saying it is divine because it's good physics. Well, one of the places where these kind of plasma fires occurs involves something called archaeoacoustics. Archaeoacoustics was made famous by the chambers under Malta called the hypogeum, where the echo is so exquisite that if you stick your head in this one cavity, you begin to have this little bliss experience. And the reason is because the acoustics are phase conjugate, centripetal, implosive, and they light the flame in the mind. Actually, there was a spot in the famous monastery at Sintra with the Templars in Portugal, where so many people had their kundalini triggered that they had a special place where they put the people who went basically nuts, insane, because their metabolism was accelerated so quickly. If they're not ready for it, it's the same as uncontrolled kundalini. It drives you nuts. Which is if they put the crown on the king and he's not thinking a shareable thought, the acceleration of mentation will drive him unstable. So you either get shareable or you get dead. That is the nature of plasma acceleration. It's similar to having a lightning experience, and which is a sort of near-death experience, sort of the movie powder. And in order to inhabit the center of the lightning bolt, you must either think a shareable thought or generate heat, because at the very center of that lightning bolt there is perfect charge distribution, and we call that the mind of God, or the center of pure intention. But it's actually conjugate plasma that's so recursive and centripetal that it's exquisitely self-organizing. It is self-aware. The heart of the sun would be another excellent example, and shaman regularly see through that as cool and inviting and as an eyeball. So the holy fire that occurs, the holy flame that occurs is divine, it's profoundly spiritual, it is self-aware, and it requires good physics to understand it. You can make the holy fire, this flame that does not consume, profoundly spiritual metaphor, if you understand longitudinal microwave interferometry, plasma containment, which happens to be just what's happening when you have peak perception, peak bliss experience in your mind. We use the story. When Ingo Swann heated the thermistor at a distance with his mind, the same way both the Cherokee and the Bon Po are not a shaman until they've lit a flame with their mind. When Ingo Swann did it through the thermistor at a distance, he did it through a Faraday cage, proving that only longitudinal EMF was lighting the fire. We know exactly what creates longitudinal EMF in brainwaves. We know what creates it in archaeoacoustics, and that's called phase conjugate implosion, this golden ratio cascade. So what I'm saying is, all the spiritual ideas of history are made more beautiful and more self-empowering with a well-understood physics. And now we can move this blue flame, which is all of our ideas consumed, It's the physics of the collective unconscious, the communion of saints. It's how to design the electric field to make a graveyard work, because if you can't make phone calls to your ancestors, you lose survival value. And, you know, Korotkov measured what electric field allowed Kogies to make phone calls to their ancestors, and it was a fractal field.
Now, when you say Bolt, I just had to jump in here. My middle name is Bolt, and my father named me that because not only did he also work with Buckminster Fuller, and he was a disciple of his and worked with Bucky. I have baby pictures, but he named me Bolt because nature's only pure form of energy is a lightning bolt, just what you just said, and that's what we are. At the core of it is the plasma energy. So it's even though I don't understand it as much as you in terms of the scientific data, I understand that we are energy and we all are one, and that's the point of this.
You would be
everyone is that core energy.
Jonah and the lightning bolt. Well, no, the idea is, and I have been teaching the physiology of Kundalini for 30 years. I was adopted by Bentov, who wrote the book Biomechanics of Kundalini. He's talking about pendulum. But the point is that, you know, bliss is the ultimate solution to the yearning for a fast roller coaster. That's what Kundalini is. And what's happening is the metabolic density, we now know it's ADP, ATP, which is why Kundalini is measurable in the microwave, as Drach did. So what's happening is this lightning bolt, it's a phonon modulated sacrocranial envelope of the high microwave, the coherent UV, it's all of the above. It's measurable broad spectrally. It's the physics of how the DNA gets the microchloridians in the blood, you know. And when you relax enough to have zero resistance to spin, it's the same physics of preparing to die well, that in that center of spin, only shareable waves survive. And if you define what is a shareable wave perfectly, it's perfect biologic coherence. It's the reason your heart coherence, which I invented the mathematics of, it's the reason your heart coherence literally goes up when you speak your truth and goes down when you tell a lie. It's a lie detector, because biologically phase coherence is a lie detector. You cannot tell a lie and have your heart sing, because it doesn't work. Your biology knows what is a truly shareable wave. And the climax form of coherence is called phase conjugate, which is quite literally a fractal field. So when you die, in order to have your plasma inserted into that field, collective unconscious, the communion of saints, ancestral memory, there's a discipline required, which is why today's hospitals are literally the definition of hell, because electrosmog and incoherent electrical environments prevent this transition, which is required for biology to have successful death. We know exactly what successful death is. It's very measurable. Korotkov measured it. We know where your plasma goes at death and why, and when it leaves your body, and what you need at death plasma-wise. And it requires a hygiene. Well, I guess
when you go into talking about the natural death and things like that, there's a thing I'm sure you were earthing, where we walk on the ground and we ground out our electromagnetic, like a battery. We're conduits for Mother Gaia. We bring in energy through the crown chakra. We release it through the energy field of the planet. How does that play into the fractal field? How does earthing play into that fractal field, and why is it so important? And all listeners out there, try it. You should do it, what, 10, 15 minutes a day, Dan? To release those negative ions and release that into the earth?
That's a very appropriate question, yes. Quite specifically, from an electrical engineering perspective, getting grounded psychologically and electrically means access to a fractal, which means a place to allow charge to be distributed perfectly, which is precisely what grounding is, which means it gives you phase conjugate reference to every other biologic wave of the planet. So, for example, the health statistics for those who live above the third floor of buildings is much worse. They hide this information, but the fact is high-rise buildings are horrible for your aura because your access to the Schumann harmonics is about gone. And so this access to ground is access to a fractal, so it's absolutely correct. quality access to quality ground is essential for health. So I totally agree with the earthing book and the earthing movement, and you're exactly correct. The way this translates, I'll give you one example. Our friend Jasmine, who teaches people how to live without food. And we have friends who are very vital, who have been without food for years. In Italy, Jasmine teaches at our center, Torino. And
You mean like pranayamas?
well, but they require, they don't,
Live off prana?
yeah, they don't eat. But it's very interesting. I'm not saying, I think eating a part of your planet is useful, but I think to have the skill is quite useful as well. But one of the things that you need to do is be essentially barefoot in nature for X number of minutes every day, which is what you're referring to, this access to good quality ground. Some of the other things are very instructive as well for learning to live off chi, basically off prana, which is, we now know, biologic capacitance, literally cold plasma of biology, which is what they call the Holy Spirit. But the other things required, interesting, is you need to spend a certain part of your day doing what you believe is your highest level of service. And also, unfortunately...
Why is that so important? If you can go into it a little deeper.
Well,
Why? Because I know for me, I do it as best I can in you, but for the listeners out there, what does that mean to them? Your highest, does that mean help a lady cross the street as little as that? Or can you expand upon that with some examples?
well, remember that at the core, the lightning core of imploding DNA is basically a billion-year device for collecting which waves represent survival information. So DNA is essentially a collectivizing device. It's like an intergalactic democracy. Everybody that uses DNA, you know, when a couple thousand people died at one moment on 9/11, we measured the fact that globally that was perceived. That's part of DNA being a collectivizing electric conjugate device. The capacitor that measured that, by the way, is more than a Josephson junction, the Princeton Noosphere project. But this collectivizing electrical system of DNA is interstellar as well. But so when you believe you are serving, it means the charge of all of DNA is willing to, may the force be with you, Luke. But if you do not believe inside yourself that you are serving, then you cut off that line to that capacitance, that life force. So basically, whatever your inner belief is of your own highest level of service is what allows you to collect that charge, which gives access to spin. That's quite simple. So the other things that were required was that you needed to learn to breathe properly in such a way, obviously. We know that heart rate variability curve, the LF-HF, is actually tuned by your breath with the yoga of breath, which is then that HRV curve is the spine liquid pump, which is breath tuned, all of which is trained beautifully in our iPhone application, heartsring.com, and the next version that we're releasing has the sacrocranial harmonics in it. So this ability to breathe properly, to, as a conventional yogi would say, but now we know the physics, to extract the charge from the air, etc. So there's a whole discipline around learning to live from charge, but effectively, when Celestine Prophecy said all human interactions about charge, you know, who to kiss, what to eat, it was you're collecting this capacitance. And that's effectively, when Jesus says somebody touched my garment, you know, he was sensing his aura. So you begin to gather your aura about you like a garment, and you can actually define all the decisions in your life around this acquisition of charge. And then when you do that well, you begin to have bliss experience, and your DNA implodes, and then you're able to take something phase coherent through death, and that defines the body polis. You know, a beehive, the body polis, doesn't swarm, propagate, until the aura of the beehive reaches critical mass. And the same thing is true of your aura when you sleep and when you die. The critical inertial mass for your aura, the blue fire, determines if you take something with you. And the beehive won't swarm unless there's royal blood, which is a navigation skill. And in your case, what it means basically is that you do not have a body polis unless you have access to a bliss experience. And this is a biologic proof that bliss is the reason politics, the body polis, exists. Something we think George Bush did not know.
And it exists because they don't want us to.
Well, you know, that was the title of my first book on this subject. It was called Implosion, Secret Science of Immortality. and it was Implosion, Ecstasy, Secret Science of Ecstasy and Immortality. And you can download the PDF, goldenmean.info/consciouskids, and that entire PDF color. But basically the book makes the case that bliss is a biologic imperative. Because once you have access to a form of bliss, ecstasy, peak experience, you have access to your own source of charge. It's sort of like what comes after the internet. It's the climax form of education. It gives you access to, the biological radio is access to all information. It's why I can talk fast. And functionally, it determines whether you're going to take something with you at death. Now, if somebody were able to prove to you as an electrical engineering that you do not die successfully unless you get the form of bliss that charges your aura, then clearly you could make the case that the reason politics exists is to teach your children how to have a bliss experience. So, you know, this is what we our little cliche on this, that we had the cheering audience in Italy. We said, no, culture is not defined by shoe polish color and wine color. No, culture is defined by whether you have the skill to teach your children how to have a bliss experience. And from that good definition of culture, we know that indigenous peoples had culture, and Western modern, we do not have culture, because we do not know how to teach our children how to have a bliss experience.
And I think bliss experience also refers to what I say on my radio show when I talk self-empowerment. Between religion and this and that, we've all looked outside ourselves, where we're not even looking into the information on ourselves. If we can help people realize the empowerment that each one of us has, it will in turn radiate that to the world. And I think that's what you started off by saying, is that your work is spiritual work. That's what it boils down to. Without the spiritual work inside, then how can we help radiate that information to the rest? We can't. And that's what I've noticed myself and many others, so it's really good to hear you say that. We have about 10 minutes left, Dan. If you could, what are some upcoming sort of things that you see in the future, say the next 5 years, that you really think are going to start changing humanity? We see all these new technologies coming out, all this new research, Nassim Haramein, you. Where do you see this shift going over the next 5 years? Do you think the age of Aquarius is here? Do you think people are waking up? Do you see this coming mainstream, this information, this technology?
Well, let me give an example of something that I think was important. Akhenaten, he was hired by the Syrians to make a bliss temple called Amarna Amenti, which was basically where a soul group could come together and focus their bliss plasma charge collectively sufficiently to be accelerated through the heart of our star, the sun, which turns out to be basically the only way in and out of here. Now, our ancestors all knew that access to a stargate was basically essential, and most of the wars of history were over these stargates. In the Anunnaki Draco Urus technology, or language, this was called Dharana. Example, Uru Asa LM, Jerusalem. Uru meant the place of the dragon, Draco, bloodline. Asa meant queen, the royal. El means the place of the... Yes, and L means the place of the phase shift, charged translation of vorticity, implosion, as in Elohim. So Uras LM, Jerusalem, was a spaceport, but not in the conventional sense of, oh, where you launch the rocket from. I mean, there was a little bit of that, but it was basically a plasma propulsion, a plasma projection terminal. Now, that is broken. That one it doesn't work anymore, so might as well cancel the war, in my opinion. But what's actually necessary, however, is that this is a small kindergarten a long way from downtown, and graduation requires being able to project your plasma through the heart of the sun. Basically, if your ETs did not arrive in a plasma bubble, but instead arrived in heavy metal, you know they're the low end, the wrong side of the tracks, so to speak. So basically, plasma projection is the future. Plasma projection is the definition of the word Shem-An. Shem means a high word, firestone, implosive capacitance, An, Anu, sun god. Implosive sun god, shaman, is one who can project their plasma their center of perception, hopefully through the eye of the sun. Plasma projection defines Kundalini. Plasma projection defines successful death. Plasma projection defines what Jodie Foster did in the movie Contact. Plasma projection defines what we need to do heat containment to make cold fusion possible. Cold fusion exists in pine cones, and it's done with fractal capacitors, and the money we're wasting on these atom smashers could feed Africa for a decade. So I say the future exists in understanding plasma containment, plasma compression, plasma implosion, cold plasma, fractalfield.com/cold plasma, and that's why we're doing this with the Therify.net, because we have a way of making a Stargate. That's what it is. When a shaman closes his eyes and sees through the eye of a tornado, you can make the same thing between two plasma balls, and that is just like ball lightning, which is so famous. Ball lightning is famous for responding to telepathy. Do you know why? Perfect tornado at the center of a donut. At that center of the lightning, ball lightning is basically living plasma. It's, you know, it's the holy fire. It's mindful, living every time.
I just wanted to say it's unbelievable because last night I watched Fox News for a second before bed because it was on, and the Pope, in front of like 1 million people, said, "We have to thank and give praise to the sun god."
Good work, yes.
He said that. And then he said we're all returning to light. He said that. So something is going on. You're doing great work. I'm doing great work. And I think it really is an awakening process of the stuff that's happening right now. We have a few minutes left, and I want to ask you one last question, Dan. Before the interview ends, what is a last statement or a quote that you could say to the world that can help really inspire people to take some action, get into some action, to help themselves, and then in turn to help the world? What would that be? What would you have to say?
Well, I would say, like in Celestine Prophecy, when they said all human interaction is about charge, that what we're learning is that it is our aura we take with us at death, not our body. Now, aura comes from the word Au, meaning gold, Ra, the gold aura of the sun god, which is the origin of thing, O-R, which or is gold, you know. And so, and gold here is more than metaphor for a phase conjugate implosive geometry, looking for a heart of gold and growing old. So what I would say to people is you're making decisions through your life. For every decision you make, think to yourself, is this going to cause my aura to grow or not? And by the way, this is not a subjective question. The GDV, gas discharge visualization, Karatkas aura measurement tool, bio-well.eu. You know, when your teenager says, I'm doing recreational drugs, and you say, oh, no, you might be getting holes in your aura, this is now measurable. And so feeding your aura, by the way, the ancient term for this was fa'atun, which is to say to fatten. So if you want to fatten your aura, fa'atun, to feed your aura, basically you need to understand how this cold plasma of the spirit, biological capacitance, propagates. It's like walking by a mountain and you say, I would like to call the aura of that mountain to me, you know, may the force be with you, Luke. Now, the charge in that mountain is very self-aware, and it will come to you if you are a wave shareable enough so that the charge over there knows by jumping into you, it will become immortal, which is to say, do you have pure intention?
Excellent. I think that between the core group of people like yourself and myself, I think our intentions are pure, and your work that you're doing on the planet is just utmost unbelievable. So thank you, Dan, you know, from my heart, for your work and your service and what you're doing. And if you can quickly give out some of your websites where people find some more information and follow some of the studies you're doing.
Yes, of course, the basic website is fractalfield.com. However, just for situations like this where we know so many people who really like to learn the science interactively, we're launching a new project, Fractal University. And we have the best science teachers of all these subjects. fractalu.com. And the courses start on November 1. They're very inexpensive, very global, and you sign up for one subject and you can repeat that subject in the following courses for free indefinitely. And we have the best people in the world on life principle, the Tai Chi. You know, there are shamans that know how to visualize the 7 figure eights to actually get inside your aura and help you have a bliss experience. It's very, very practical, this ability to manipulate your aura. It's literally, you embed yourself in the cube of space, which is what Hebrew and Sanskrit were about, the 7 layers of heart muscle, the 7 spins of tetra. In the Tai Chi, it's called caressing the facets of the diamond, which is the octet, the center of the stellar tetra. So this whole cube of space, but applied to your own aura control, which is what Ophanim Enochian was, which is what John Dee was doing with the Ophanim angels when he made the storm that took out the Spanish Armada. It's all a very practical science, and we're making that available, fractalu.com. And if you're interested in this plasma healing, therify.net. So we have a global project on this. The agricultural stuff is all at bioactivefield.com. So thank you very much. It's been a blessing.
Dan, thank you so much, and just continue the work you're doing and lighting so many people up. We're definitely bringing in the new system. It's not far away. So thank you again, and have a blessed day in France, the other side of the pond. And we will definitely speak to you soon, and we wish you the best.
Thank you for being a light. Thanks for being a lightning bolt, Chase, Jonah.
Oh, thank you. That's what they call me, Jonah Appleseed, lighting it up.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to have our second guest, and then we have 3 or 2 more total after that, 3 total. So Dan Winter from all the way from.
Thanks, everybody.
And take a quick commercial break. This music, just so you know, is phenomenal.
You are no longer a presenter.
And the DJ music artist, just to give you a little background, is Dissolve.